Hello makers, and welcome to Sheer Stitchery. I'm Catherine Harris, and if you're new here, I do sewing and DIY tutorials each week, so smash that subscribe button down below. This week, I wanted to share with you a sew along for the 2021 Summer Sampler Vintage Restyle Block of the Month. And this week we have block 1, which is the Crossroads block. Let's get into it.
Bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 bum.
Now, this block is a modern take on the traditional Irish train block, and it was designed by Alison Harris from Cluck Cluck Sew, and I'll leave a link to her website down below. And with the block of the month pattern from the Vintage Restyle, you've got a lot of different pattern designers that are coming out with different blocks every single month, and you get that pattern and then you do it up. Now, I wanted to show you what a quilt would look like if you made it entirely out of this Crossroads block. And I think it looks really stunning. And you can use a lot of different fabrics and tones as well. You can make it light or dark. You can use prints or solids. I decided to opt for some solids, and I chose from the Northcott fabrics here, and I will link them down below exactly which ones I decided to use, but you could really change this up with anything that you are thinking of making. Now, one thing I wanted to mention with this block in particular is you need to ensure that you are doing a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance, because there isn't really any excess to trim off once you are done your block. So you want to make sure you are very precise when measuring out those seam allowances. And another tip is to always press in between stitching any of these together, because that is going to ensure that your block is square. Now, you do have an opportunity to square it up, but if you are off even by the slightest amount, your block may come out just slightly smaller. Now, because of that, I am going to classify this block as a confident beginner for quilting as opposed to a straight beginner, just because those seam allowances are very particular. But if you are careful and you go slow and cut perfectly, you're not going to have any issue. Let's get to making that block. So I wanted to start with some tips on how to stay organized with a quilt along. So I am going to use my paper rotary cutter to cut out these little squares. On the one side is the suggested fabric, which is going to be in all of the pattern pieces. On the other side is my actual fabric. Now for this, I chose fabric that was rather similar to what they had suggested, just because I thought it would be easier with the sew along as we do this. But if you're using fabric that is drastically different, this is such a good way to keep it all together. And I like to pin these to my actual fabric pieces, and my fabric is from Northcott here. And I use this in order to keep absolutely everything organized. Now, the next thing that I like to do is I also like to print off a second one of these so that I can attach those to the actual fabric swatches. Next, I keep a master sheet with my colors as well as swatches of my actual fabric. And I have a download for you here. It has the ones that are called for in the pattern and your actual fabric here, with an area for your swatch card, and then you can print off 2 pages of this second page here so that you can keep everything organized. Next, we are going to make the center for square. So we're going to take a mango and a shell, or whichever fabrics coordinate to that, and we are going to place them in a 4 square like so, alternating. And then we are just going to flip them together, and we are going to chain piece this going down, and you're going to want to reduce your stitch length to about 1.5 for the chain piecing. And then with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, we are just going to continue to stitch them together like so. And they should be attached, and you can just snip them just like so to get them to disconnect. Next, we are going to press them, and you're going to press the seam towards the mango color, so that darker color that we are using here. And we're going to do the same for the other one, also pressing towards the mango. Then when we fold them together like so, your seams will nest. You have one going one way and one going the alternate way. And what I like to do is I like to add 2 pins right at that seam junction so that everything lines up perfectly. Next, we are going to press the seams open in this instance. And you can see we have a perfect 4 square right here. And then you are just going to true this up according to the pattern and just being sure that everything is perfectly aligned. And I just have a wee little bit to trim off. Next, we are going to make the mango 4-corner patch units. So you're going to need mango, white, and curry blocks. And you are just going to place them in a 4 patch just like so, using one of the mango, one of the curry, and 2 of the white. And then we are going to place them right sides together, and we're going to chain piece this just as we did with the middle 4 square block. And just disconnect them here, and then we are going to press them. And so in this instance, we are going to press towards the mango and the curry blocks, so those darker colored blocks. And then just as we had done before, we are going to arrange them and place them right sides together and stitch across. And then we are going to press that seam open. And give it a nice good press, and you can also true up this block. And next, you are going to take a mango and 2 whites, and we are going to finish this block. So we're going to start with the bottom layer, where we're going to take the small square on top of the rectangle, and then you're going to place the rectangle on top of the block you had done with your 4 square. Chain piece this together, and then we can begin to press. And right here, you can just press that seam open, and we'll do the same to the other block here. And now we are going to finish this block and put it together. So as we're going to do that, you just want to make sure that all of the squares line up in a diagonal as so, and then with the right sides together, matching up that center seam. And this one, because the seams are pressed open, you really want to make sure that you have it perfectly in line. And the way I do this is I actually add a pin on either side of that before I stitch it so that everything doesn't shift and we have perfectly matched up corners. Then we are just going to press that seam open, and we have this block finished. And you are going to true this block up, just trimming anything that you need to, and make a second block just like so. Next, we are going to make the shell corner 4 patch blocks. So you're going to need curry, shell, and white. And we are making these the exact same way as we did the other one, except instead of mango, we are using shell. So I'm just going to quickly review that, where we are just going to place these and create those 4 patches, and then we are going to press the seams towards the colored block, that being the curry and the shell colored blocks. And it's kind of hard to see on the shell color because it is such a light pink. And then we are going to place them right sides together and making sure that our seams nest, and then stitch across there. And then we are going to open up that seam allowance and press it. And next we are going to take a shell square and 2 white rectangles to form the rest of this block. And then we are just going to match them up like so and stitch them in place. Don't forget to disconnect them, and then we are going to press them. And in this instance, we are pressing the seams open. And just press this side open as well. And once it is done, we are then going to place it together, right sides together here. And then we are just going to ensure that we are matching up those seams so that we have perfectly matched corners here. And stitch across. And once it is stitched across, then we can go ahead and press the seams open once more, and then give that whole block a nice good press. And then we can take it over and we can trim it as necessary. And you are going to want to make 2 of those blocks. So you have 2 of those blocks and 2 of the other ones in the mango. So 2 mango and 2 shell. Next, we are going to complete the block. So you're going to use the baby blue and the bluegrass pieces that you had cut from the pattern, and we are just going to stitch them along here. And all of these pieces we can chain piece all at the exact same time, taking a green and a blue. I don't use any pins, and just make sure you're doing the 1/4 inch seam allowance as you're going in here because it is very tight. And once that is all done, you are going to clip them apart, and then we're going to press our seams open. And you're going to do that for all 4 pieces that you have done. Now we're going to put it all together. So for the top piece, we are going to place our 2 blocks, a mango and a shell, in between the finishing block that we have. And we are just going to place them right sides together and stitch them up. Once that is stitched, we are then going to press our seams open. And so just be careful not to press the other seams that you had already pressed out of the way. Using one of those tiny irons is so helpful in this instance as opposed to a full-size iron. And that is the top block. Now for the middle block, we are going to take that center 4 piece and attach it to either side of our finishing blocks on the outside here. And once those are all attached, then we are going to press the seams, you guessed it, open. And once we have that pressed open, I like to flip it to the right side and give it a nice good press from the right side. And that's what the middle block will look like. And for the bottom block, we are going to do the exact same thing as the top block, except it's in the opposite order of the mango and the shell. And then we are going to press the seam allowances open on here. And once we have that all done, I like to give it a good press along the top here, and you can use a pressing cloth if you are worried about getting those shiny spots. And that's what the bottom block looks like. Now we have all 3 strips here to create our block, and we're going to place them right sides together, placing the middle piece on top of the bottom piece and being very careful to match up where all of those blocks meet up at the center. So once again, whenever we are meeting at a seam, I am just using 2 pins to ensure that nothing shifts or moves, especially because these are seams that are pressed open and they aren't locking. And then just stitch across there to get the bottom, and then we're going to place the top piece right sides together on top of that center piece, also matching up along those seams with 2 pins to hold everything nicely in place. You can also place pins along either end as well. And then we are going to head over to our pressing station and press those seams open. And once we have all of those seams nicely pressed open, then you can flip your block over and give it a nice good press from the right side here. And your finished block is almost finished. All we need to do is square it up to 12.5 inches square. And there is our beautiful finished block ready to insert into our quilt.
Bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum.
And there you have it. Our first block is all done. Now you can choose to create an entire quilt out of that block or continue on with the rest of the sampler. And I'm excited for next month when I will share with you block number 2. And we don't know which one it's going to be, so I am so excited to see what it is. Until next time, makers, let's get our sewspiration on.
Bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum. Bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum.